The Phantasy Star series got its start on the Sega Master System in 1987 and would go on to produce some of the most influential RPGs in video game history. And this collection for the Game Boy Advance is still a great way to enjoy these classics on the go. It includes the first three games, Phantasy Star for the SMS and Phantasy Star II and III, which were originally released for the Sega Genesis. At first glance, the Phantasy Star series isn't too different from other popular RPGs like Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, especially when it comes down to the gameplay, with mostly top-down exploration, random enemy encounters, menu-based combat, gaining XP, adding party members. You get the idea. Oh yeah, and the original Phantasy Star released just a few days after Final Fantasy did, in case you were wondering. But there are a few things that set it apart from the competition, most notably its anime art style and infusion of science fiction elements. The first game in particular featured some very impressive graphics for its time, along with some first-person, three-dimensional dungeon crawling reminiscent of the classic Wizardry series. Phantasy Star II and III would also go on to be instant classics for the Sega Genesis in the late 80s and early 90s, thanks to some truly epic storylines and improved gameplay in all aspects. So having all three of these massive adventures on a tiny little GBA cart can only mean hours of time to kill, as you unravel stories spanning across different planets and even generations. The games are ported very faithfully in this compilation, bad translations and all, and with some minor graphical adjustments made to accommodate for the Game Boy Advance's limited resolution, but otherwise they play virtually the same. There have been some reports of game crashes, but I've never happened across one myself. And by the way, these are not enhanced remakes. For that you'll have to seek out the Phantasy Star Generations games, which were only released in Japan for PS2 as part of the Sega Ages project. And speaking of Japanese releases, this collection was also released over there for the Sega Saturn and includes Phantasy Star IV. Potentially being my favorite of the series, it was a bit disappointing that it wasn't included with this North American GBA release. Luckily, Phantasy Star IV is still pretty easy to play these days, as part of the Sega Genesis collection for PS2 and PSP, and for Sonic's Ultimate Genesis collection for PS3 and Xbox 360, and also on the Wii's Virtual Console. But even despite the lack of Part 4 to make this a comprehensive Phantasy Star experience, this is still a quality package of some truly classic RPGs. They may feel a bit dated in some ways, but their influence is undeniable, and this is a great way to get all nostalgic and remember the countless hours spent wandering the solar system of Algol.